Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Dan Sherman. I don't know Dan very well, but he sent me his book, Above Black, which is available at his table in the exhibit hall. It's a very startling document, simply written, to the point, astounding, but yet somehow believable. Dan is kind of a case in this phenomena of damned if you do and damned if you don't. Because when someone steps forward, of course, the first attack is against the messenger. And people start picking every single little thing about anybody apart. Oh gosh, we can't find his grade school records. We don't know that he really worked there. And so on and so on and so on. He said his blood type was B minus and it's B plus. Anything to tear people apart. Now, in Dan's case, those that have checked, everything he has said about himself checks out, right down to the finest detail. So now they say, hey, everything checks out to the finest detail. He can't be real, he's got to be a plant. Damned if you do and damned if you don't. Ladies and gentlemen, you make up your minds. Dan Sherman.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. My blood type is A positive, actually. Can everybody hear me? It's the first time up here at the podium. Test. Everybody hears me? Great. Thank you for coming out this morning. We've had some really great speakers. The one right before was a little frank. I'm not as frank as he is. He was pretty funny as well. As you can see in the program, I was involved in a government project called Preserve Destiny. In the next hour, I'll attempt to give you a quick overview of what I know, and in the last half hour, I'll open the floor up to the audience for some questioning. Let me start by giving you some background on the events leading up to my decision to come forward and write the book Above Black. I got out of the Air Force in April of 1995, and at the time had no intentions of sharing my experience with anyone, let alone the world. I had come from a world, the military, where keeping secrets was a virtue and telling them was a sin. And of course I didn't want to commit any sins. However, in May of 1996, I came to the realization that I should probably tell my fiancée at the time because she had a right to know about this aspect of my life. Telling her was one of the most difficult things that I've ever done. And only because if she didn't believe me, I knew it would affect the bond of trust that we had built in our relationship. But I did tell her. And lo and behold, after a serious session of questioning on her part, she believed me. I had crossed an important barrier or obstacle mentally at that time. And from there I began to wonder, well, what would happen if I told the public about my experience? My number one concern was, what would the government do and how would they react? At this point, the biggest motivating force behind my going public with the story was my desire to have a little bit of revenge. And you'll see the reasons for that as I unfold my experience. So in the summer of 1996, I began to formulate how I would go about revealing what I knew without getting into trouble. And this was a very difficult task. In order to do that, I had to selectively reveal what I knew about the gray aspect or the alien aspect of my job and Preserve Destiny without revealing other information in the black realm of what I did. And there is a distinction between the two, and I'll go over that in a little bit. This was a major challenge that I was faced with, definitely. So as not to leave you confused in the terminology of black and gray, let me go over that a little bit and begin my talk with that. When understanding these types of things and how the military keeps things the way as tight-lipped as they do, you have to have an understanding of the background of how they classify things. And as it was described to me when I was originally indoctrinated into Preserved Destiny and into the black programs, they analogized it to an onion. And an onion has many different layers. The outer layer, when it comes to the classification system, represents the unclassified information. And the unclassified information is when you go by a base or any base, installation, government installation, anything, if what you readily see with your eyes, that is the unclassified mission or aspect of that installation, whatever you can surmise by visually looking at it. And this is the mission that is publicized to the local community, and everybody knows that this mission is here. Well, that does not necessarily mean that that is all the missions that that base has, and it can also be the only mission that base has. You never know. You come to the second layer in the onion, and that is the for official use only, or FOUO. And those of you who have a military background, this part of it may be old hat. FOUO is just designed to keep little bits and pieces of information from, just being dispersed randomly throughout the community. And it also is designed to keep those bits of information controlled so that you can't put all kinds of bits and pieces of information together and get a bigger picture. And so that's what FOU is for. Then we come to the next layer, and that is secret. Secret can have, the definition of secret classification is information that, if released, could cause serious damage to national security. And here's where we get into our code words and caveats and things like that, and secret can have code words. Then we come into the next layer, and that is the top secret. And within the top secret, you have many caveats and many code words, some of which we all know, Umbra and Magic, and the ones that we've all read about. And this is where it starts to get murky. Black projects are considered to be top secret projects, but it is a separate layer within the onion. And that's the next layer we come to, is the black aspect. And a lot of people are confused. They think that the alien projects or alien-related things in the military are black. And it's an easy mistake to make, but in essence they are not. Black projects are co-located with gray projects, and then gray is the inner layer of the onion. And, excuse me. Yeah, I need to get some water here. I got some, thanks. My voice is naturally raspy without getting nervous in front of 200 people. It's very important to understand that when people work on an alien project or gray project, they also are working on the black or co-located black project that's located at the same location. And they do this in order to have envelopes of security around the alien project. And this was the challenge that I was faced with. Of course, I worked on the co-located black projects at the same time that I worked on the gray project. And when people come forward, or if people come forward about their story, the government's really not concerned about it, the gray aspect of it, because there's just so much information out there anyway that it's just a little pebble in the pond of all this information, and they know they're not going to get any hard evidence because they've made it such that you can't get hard evidence, so they're not concerned about that. But they will prosecute you for releasing any black information. Now, of course, if you had hard evidence, then they would they'd definitely come after you, but and not legally. But when you come forward with information, you probably will release, just by virtue of association, you'll release some co-located black type of information, and that is what they will come after you on, and they will prosecute you, and you're in breach of your national security paperwork that you filled out. So my challenge was to come forward with the gray information that I worked with, the gray program that I worked with, but at the same time not release any black information. And that was a challenge. So now that you understand the classification levels and how they keep things pent up, hence the name also of the book, Above Black. You've probably heard of Timothy Good's book, Above Top Secret. Well, Top Secret is one of the layers, black is one of the layers, and then gray is one of the layers, and that's how I named the book. A little short synopsis of my experience. In 1992, I went to school at the NSA complex at Fort Meade, Maryland, and it was for my normal job, electronic intelligence. And the first day that I arrived there, I was given a call. I was called in my hotel room to meet with the captain. He wanted to meet with me. Okay, that's fine. I went to the place where he told me to meet him. It was at the actual NSA building. And I met him, and after we went through the security protocols, and he had to escort me in because my security clearances weren't there yet. Well, we went to his office, and he proceeded to tell me about Preserved Destiny and my role in it. Now, of course, I wasn't predisposed to this type of world, so to speak, the UFO world. I've been I've had a passing interest in it, just like anybody who is curious would have, but I wasn't. I didn't subscribe to all the magazines, and I wasn't an aficionado, so to speak. So when he brought up this project and my role in it, of course, I was at first very, very surprised, very shocked, very. I didn't believe him at first. I thought it was some sort of gimmick or trick that they were playing on the new guy that was coming to school, and someone was going to jump out of the closet and say, "You believed in the alien thing, ha ha ha." But that didn't happen. Nobody came out of the closets. He told me that because of our contact with an alien species in 1947, which all of you will recognize that year, at the time I didn't recognize the year. It didn't mean anything to me. But later on, of course, I did recognize it. But 1947, because of their contact, they learned some things. And in 1960, they launched a program in concert with an alien species to cultivate humans that would have the ability to intuitively or in essence communicate with this alien species. Now, he gave me the reason why this was, or a roundabout reason why this was, and since then I am led to believe that it's probably not the real reason, but surprise, right? I was told that this communication ability was important because of some future event that was going to happen that was going to knock out all electromagnetic communications around the world, and that the intuitive communicators would in essence establish a communications network for the important government, or the important aspects of government, and to keep a command and control around the world. And it would be done via this alien species. Well, that was fine at the time. I don't think I was actually listening at the time after he told me that about the initial alien aspect of it. But he told me that I was going to be an intuitive communicator, or I was an intuitive communicator. My mother was abducted in 1960, or the project started in 1960, and they abducted females at that time they were abducting females for genetic research, or not research, but genetic testing to test their compatibility with this particular procedure that they were going to do. And in 1963, the genetic management phase of it started, and that's what they called it. That's his words, genetic management. And that was indeed the year that I was conceived. And he said that after I was conceived, my mother was abducted, and here's where we go off into la la land here, but it's true. The embryo, which was me, was genetically managed or altered so that I would have the ability to intuitively communicate. Well, of course, this all came to me in about a 45-minute session, and it was a little bit to digest, obviously. I left, and where he told me that I would be going to school there after my regular school, my 8 hours of regular schooling that I had originally come there for. At night, I would be going to school to uncover these abilities. They were there, it's just they weren't cultivated and uncovered yet. So I said, okay, being the good little soldier that I was, yeah, that's fine, great. I'm doing this for a cause, and all right, great, let's go. He took me a couple days later, or a day later, he took me to the school, and we went from a van at the NSA complex, and the van had no windows. Of course, I couldn't see where we were going. And we ended up in a garage type of facility. There were no windows in that facility either. As a matter of fact, my whole career, I probably didn't see many windows. We went to a door that had a palm, a metal plate that was in the shape of a palm, and he put his palm against it, and of course he entered me into the system so that I could put my palm against it when I was going to school. And we went down in an elevator, and of course I surmised we were going down because of the feeling of it, but there were no buttons or anything that said first floor, second floor, third floor. It was just one button saying go. So we went down, and we came into a schoolroom that had two workstations in there, one on the left, one on the right, as you exited the elevator. And there was a window, a blacked out window at the right in front of us at the end of the room. And I worked at the left workstation the whole time I was there, and another guy who was going to school at the same time as I was worked at the right station. We were briefed that we were never to talk to one another, and indeed I never said one word to him the whole weeks that I was there. We did see each other in Chow Hall at one of the Fan X complexes one time and smiled at each other, but other than that, I didn't have any communication with him. So my school started, and it was about 8 weeks, somewhere around there, 2 months, a little over 2 months, and I went to school in the day for my regular job. I came home to the hotel, and about 45 minutes after I'd come home from the hotel, the van would be waiting for me downstairs. I would get in the van. I would be driven. Sometimes the van took 20 minutes. Sometimes it took 40 minutes to get there. They've altered the routes, obviously, so I wouldn't know how long it took to get there, actually. And the school, I'm going to give you just a short summary of what I did in the school. I was given tones in a headphone, and I would sit in front of a computer screen, and there were 10 separate windows within the computer screen, and each window had a sine wave that goes through it. And I don't know if anybody is familiar with oscilloscopes, but you have a sine wave that looks like just looks like this, and it's on the screen. And the goal was for me to flatten this line that goes like this. I was to flatten it into a straight line. And of course, initially when I was told that by my instructor, I thought he was crazy. How am I going to do that? I didn't have any interface with the computer at all. There was no wires hooked from me to it. It was all mental. Well, the first time that one of the lines flickered, I about went out of my seat with excitement. I couldn't believe this was happening. And how they uncovered that was that they played tones through a headphone, and I was told to mentally hum those tones. Don't actually hum them, not vocally, but mentally. And so I tried as best as I could to do it, and then over time, I affected the line on the screen, and then we went to another tone, and I went to another line in the screen, and so on and so forth, and then we graduated from there to moving several lines at one time, and pretty soon I didn't even hear tones anymore. There were no more tones, and I was actually listening to words or sentences, and I would actually graduate to video. They would show a video of something, and I would have to play it back mentally. It's very, very difficult to explain, and indeed in the book it was the most difficult part of writing the book, is explaining the process by which I communicated. Well, at this time there were no alien communications. I was just interfacing with the computer. And also I had to take pills while I was there, and I didn't know what these pills were. I asked, of course I wasn't told, but I had to take pills while I was there, and then later on I also took pills at my other locations where I actually did the communications. There was an interesting thing that happened at the school. I was in my car, and I was coming back from a theater or something like that. It was late at night on a weekend, and I saw a white, well, actually I have to back up. In the garage where I'm taken every day, I have to get out of the van, and I go to the door and go down the elevator. I actually saw, because when you by this time I was very used to the whole routine. You know, I was used to my surroundings. I knew exactly, you know, what the lighting was, everything. And there was something amiss or out of place this one time that I got out of the van. I noticed a more light than there usually is, and I looked over to my left and I saw lights flashing off, or not flashing, but shining off the wall. And I thought, what is this? So I went around to the back of the van, being very brave at this time. I went around to the back of the van because I was very curious. I'd never even looked at the other side of the van and what was on the other side of the van. And I got to the back of our van, the van that took me there, and I looked around and I saw a white van parked next to the van that I came in, and it had its headlights on evidently because it was shining more light than what I was used to in that room, and that's what attracted my attention. Well, when I got back there, I just got a glimpse of the white van, and the driver of my van honked, presumably to tell me to knock it off and go to the door that you need to go to. So it startled me, and I turned around and I went back to the door. Well, I really didn't notice at the time, or I wasn't cognizant of it at the time, but I noticed a dent in the bumper of that white van. And then later on, a week or a couple weeks, I can't remember exactly the time frame, but I had noticed a white van when I was driving. I was coming back to the hotel from somewhere, and I was thinking to myself, we were at a stoplight, and he was over to the left of me, and I remember thinking, you know, could that be the white van that I saw? And it just so happens that I looked down at the bumper and and that's when I remembered that I saw a dent in his bumper, that white van in the garage. And so I got all excited. I was like, oh my gosh, should I follow it? Should I not follow it? My heart was racing, and I thought maybe it's the captain's van, you know, the captain that was talking to me, and should I be intrusive enough to follow it? So of course curiosity got the best of me, and I did follow it. And I followed it to a company. It turned into a company that has a building there next to the NSA complex. I say next to it, the town next to it, in Linthicum. And it has I'm not going to say the name of the company because I don't want any legal ramifications here, but the company specializes in noise cancellation technology, and canceling noise with 180-degree out of phase repeating of it back. And I thought that was interesting. It was an interesting aspect of the correlation between what I was doing and what they're doing. And perhaps, and I only say this because I was never involved in any black project there, perhaps they were involved with the black project that was co-located with that gray project. Very interesting. So, and I have some interesting corroborating things that have happened since I released my story with that company. There's a friend of mine, well, he's become a friend over time over email. His name is Bob, and he keeps researching things back there. He lives back there, so he keeps looking into things, and he's correlated the bump that I felt right prior to getting out of the van. Before the van came to a stop, there was always a bump, like a speed bump. Well, he went to that company, and he saw a speed bump there, and there's a garage there that's guarded by a car on the weekends, and there's a lot of different correlations that he's come up with, as well as the leaders of this particular company have some history with some suspect organizations within the military, or within the government. Very interesting stuff, and none of this of what I've done, he's done. Well, from there I graduated, and I got up to the level that I guess they decided that I was good enough to graduate, so I graduated. I went back to the base that I was stationed at when I went there for the school, and nothing happened there, and I got orders to another base, and I went to that base probably about 9 months after I got out, or 8 months after I got out of the school. And this is the base where I had my first contact. I was introduced to another gray commander, so to speak, another captain, and I had my first contact there. And initially the contacts that I had were made up of numbers, strings of numbers. And I would actually type these numbers into a computer screen at my regular job, right, at my regular computer screen that I did my regular job at. I would start receiving a communication. I would have to open up a screen in the background that they told me how to access, and I would type the communication in there, and it was actually blank. The screen was blank even after typing. You couldn't see anything. I just had to kind of rely on where I was in the typing. I would send that off, and it would go somewhere, and I never knew where it went. And initially, like I said, the messages were made up of numbers, strings of numbers. And then towards the end of my stay at this base number 1, I call it Project Preserve Destiny base number 1 in the book. Well, I guess I should explain that. The reason why I don't name the bases is because, again, the black and gray aspect of things. If I name a base and I'm also saying that I worked on black projects, then I'm stepping over some boundaries there and revealing information that I can't. So my record speaks for itself. Where I've been, you can see where I've been in my records, and people have looked it up. And these bases are known for interesting missions. So anyway, the communications that I had towards the end, I found another. It's very complicated, but I found another level or another plane. And that's why it's the only thing I can really ascribe a name to. It's another plane of communications. It was a different plane than what our official communications were on. And on this plane, I started to ask informal questions during our communications. Up to this point, all the communications were just official. I would just repeat what they were telling me, and then I would send it off, and that was it. But then after I found this other plane, I took it upon myself to start asking other questions, questions that I had, or not other questions, just questions period, because I never asked questions prior. And I started to learn some interesting things, and I'll go over those in a little bit. I named my, I know this is, when I was in this and when I was doing this, it never, ever occurred or dawned on me that I would ever tell anybody. I mean, it never even occurred to me. So of course, I had some humor in my interface with this, and so I named my first contact. I just kind of had an informal name for him. I named him Spock. And in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have named him that because it looks too it looks too squirrely now. But I did name him Spock. I never referred to him as Spock, but that's what I personally referred to him as. And the reason why I did that was because the communications of their logic are, the fabric of their communications is very logical. And of course, we all know Spock is logical, so I kind of correlated to that with the fact that he's an alien as well. But let me describe to you a little bit about the communication. The only way that I could really put it into words was analogizing it to a fabric. If you look at a nice, soft, textured fabric that has all kinds of colors to it and a lot of sensory things with this fabric, right? And if you look at a really, really small part of it in the middle and you're just focusing in on that detail within this fabric, that's kind of how this communication was. I can focus in, and I did focus in on what they were telling me, but on the peripheral, I could sense so many other things, color and feel, or analogizing it to color, but I could sense feeling and things that I really can't even describe. I could sense on the outside of this particular detail the actual subject that they were transferring to me or communicating to me, and that's the closest I can get to the description of the actual communication. The message structure was such that I would get 3 numbers, which was what I ascribed to me. I guess my number was 118 because he referred to me as 118 a couple times too. But I would get 118, and then I would put a // on the computer screen, and then I would get some sort of 5-digit code, and I never knew what this 5-digit code was, and it varied often. I called it zip code, but I never knew what it was exactly. And then I would type the 5-digit number, and then the message would start, and whether it was, I received military-related things. Most of it was actually military-related things, and a lot of things have to do with the black aspect of my job. But in the beginning, like I said, I received strings and numbers, and I had assumed those were codes probably or something like that. And then I would put 2 slashes at the end, and that was it. That was the communication. I would send it off, and they would sign off the communication, and that was it. And I'll go over some of the things that I learned once I found that other plane and asked some questions. I went to PPD base number 2 after that, and I was assigned another alien contact. And the reason why I knew this was another alien contact because the communication wasn't exactly the same. It was same in nature, but not specifically the same. I could sense a different taste, so to speak, of the communication. Well, I went along the same lines as the other one, the other name. I referred to this one as Bones. And let me now highlight some of the things that I was able to ask and to communicate regarding other things other than just the official communications. I did learn. Now, I'll preface this by saying that I never really had the ability or the time, or they never gave me the time to just sit there and converse with them. You know, that never happened. I was able to ask certain questions sometimes, and sometimes they would answer them, sometimes they wouldn't, and most times they just sign off after the official communication. But sometimes they would stay on, and I never knew what the criteria was to stay on and discuss things with me. Some of the things I learned, they have sexes. They have 2 different sexes, just like us. We never got into any details as far as how they procreate or anything like that, but I did get that they did have 2 sexes. I tried to spend a lot of time on time. I'm very interested. I've always been very interested in the aspect of time and manipulation and things like that. And so a lot of my questions were centered on that, on time, and unfortunately, whenever we did discuss time, it was very, very difficult for me to understand what they were speaking of or what he was communicating, because the level was so much higher than what my understanding was, which was frustrating to me. At the time, I wished that I had listened to Physics 101 better, but obviously it was a little bit above my head. But the things that I was able to gather and to understand was their mode of travel, how they traveled, had to do with time. And I asked about whether they could go back or forward in time. And he said, no, we can't go back or forward in time, because in order to go back in time or forward in time, you have to have a frame of reference by which to say back or forward. And there is no frame of reference in time, which I thought was, and that was my understanding of what he said, and I thought it was very, very interesting. I mulled on that for days and days and days. But another aspect of it was, he said we can go around time. We can't go through or can't go back or forward, but we can go around time, which I thought was interesting, an interesting correlation to Einstein's theory of relativity and how time warps with gravitational effects. So that was interesting. Religion. I tried to get some information on religion because I do have a fundamental Christian background, and this kind of clashed with that at times, I think. So I tried to work it out, so to speak, with the questions that I had, and the only thing that I learned from that was that, he didn't say any names like Jesus Christ or Muhammad or anything like that, but he said that we are of the same creation, and that was my understanding of what he was saying was creation. And he said that there were 2 creations. There's an intelligent creation and a non-intelligent creation. And we were both part of the same intelligent creation. Thought that was interesting. He said that they have interbred with our people, humans, in the past, but they don't do it anymore. That was my understanding, that they didn't do it anymore. He didn't say that specifically. But he did say that they have done it in the past. He referred to us, and I found this very fascinating. He referred to us as water vessels, and that was my understanding of it, or my translation. Again, all these things are what I ascribed English words to. It was very difficult sometimes to correlate what he was saying and put it into my language, but that was the closest I can get to it, is water vessels or water containers or whatever. And I kind of correlated this to perhaps, I was always trying to find out or trying to figure out what those pills were for and what they contained, and I never took any because I always thought I was being monitored by that, but perhaps these pills were to raise my oxygen level in my body because from his references there, I assumed that their bodies were made up of more oxygen than us. We're made up of probably more water, and they're not as water based as we are. I thought perhaps that was the reason for the pills. I don't know. They have intervened in our history before. I didn't give me any details, but they have interfaced with people of Earth before. Their lifespan is similar to ours, and I got the impression that perhaps maybe it was even less than ours. And energy. I learned a little bit about, we talked a little bit about energy, and he said that our scientists are just now beginning to understand how to harness and even understand the fundamentals of the energy that our sun puts out, and that we will probably come to an understanding of how to manipulate that more and use it more. That's kind of the highlights of the things that I learned. I didn't learn a great deal. I wish I would have learned more, especially if I knew I was coming out to the world. I knew that the world would have more questions than I probably did. At PPD base number 2, I started to receive other types of information, more imagery-based information. And towards the very end, right before I got out, I started to receive abduction data, or what I thought was abduction data. Now, we could debate the reasons why they would be sending me abduction data. I have absolutely no idea. The only thing that I could think of is probably they, as in the aliens or the human contacts, they were trying to test my resolve to report any and all information that I was getting. I don't know. But I was getting abduction data, and it was very disconcerting because I am human. And the information that I was receiving was not nice information. And I'll give you some examples. We had some headings, or I ascribed the headings as was communicated to me, of potentiality for recall. I would receive the information, and I would start to type it, and I would receive different categories like potentiality for recall, residual pain levels, which was particularly disconcerting, body normalization factors, nerve response curves. These things were all followed by a two-digit number. They seemed to be between 1 and 100. Now, I never knew whether a 90 was real good or bad. I didn't know where the scale was, but I was reporting it. Well, as you might imagine, I just assumed that these were abduction data because I was getting latitudes and longitudes. I was getting times, and then of course these particular headings. And what would you think? If you were receiving this type of information, would you think that it was abduction data? Well, I did. And so I went to my commander, my PPD commander, my gray commander, and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm getting, well, there were a lot of other things too, but this was the kind of the straw that hit the camel's back, broke the camel's back. I was also feeling like I was an insignificant part of this program, but at the same time a very integral part of the program. They weren't telling me anything. They weren't telling the reasons why. I never got any communications from my commander. Very rarely, I got an email every once in a while, and he'd come by every once in a while my station, and that was it. I never knew where his office was. I just felt so disconnected from the whole process, but yet I was really important because I was the receptacle for these communications. So I was very frustrated in that respect as well. But the abduction data kind of just pushed me over the edge there, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, he said, you have no choice. And of course, being, again, human, I have a pretty a stubborn streak in me. So I basically went through my black channels, the black projects that I was working on, my black chain of command, and tried to get out that way. And the normal methods did not work that way either. Now, whether the gray aspect of it was pulling strings on the black aspect, or whether it was just legitimately I could not get out, my career field was in demand at the time, and still is probably, in the black aspect. So that was probably another reason why I couldn't get out. Well, then I had to go other routes, and these routes I really can't expound upon because of the legal aspect of it, but anybody can look at my record and see the reason why I got out. Since publishing the book, a lot of interesting things have happened. No Will Smith and what's his name didn't come to my door. No men in black. But there have been some. I sent some pictures, some interesting, very very interesting pictures of PPD base number 1 to a UK magazine, Alien Encounters. I don't know if you ever heard of them. And they published an article on it, I think a couple months ago, and those pictures never came back. They said they sent them, and I even talked to the editor of the magazine. She said they have been sent, and well, they never arrived at my location. So, you know, the U.S. mail could be the culprit. Who knows? But it was an interesting side note. There have been many articles written about it. My main purpose was to not only the revenge aspect of it, because they made me give up a career in the Air Force. I was in for 12 years. They basically ruined my career in the United States Air Force, and that did not sit well with me. So that was one of the main purposes of coming forward. Another is I want to have other people who maybe are in the same program or other programs, because I'm sure there are other programs out there, to come forward and to corroborate, and so we can start getting pieces of the puzzle out. It's very important to get separate pieces of the puzzle so that we can put together a bigger picture. I know there's a bigger mission here, and indeed even at the conference here, I've been approached by some people who have other pieces of the puzzle that are quite interesting that I'm still kind of putting together. There have been some corroborating. There's actually at the meeting here this week, somebody came forward saying that they know of somebody who knows of Project Preserve Destiny. It's a good friend of his. So the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And if anybody knows anything about what my experiences are, or even correlated with it, you know, the company that I saw in Maryland, any piece of the information would be great. And sooner or later, we will put a bigger picture together. The future of Preserve Destiny is still up in the air. What they told me may not be the proper or the right particular goal, but we'll never know until more people come forward and start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, or the actual thing happens. Electromagnetic communications breaks down, or asteroid strike, or whatever it's going to precipitate that. Future of me is I'm going to continue to do conferences and continue to do a little bit of trying to get the word out. This is not my main job or whatever you want to call it, my main breadwinning thing. I'm just trying to get the word out. We're trying to get the book into a wider distribution so that we kind of get more into the mainstream, because I'm sure that there's a lot of information in the mainstream that is important. And there may be a film coming up too, so who knows. I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. If you'd like to, oh, we can't come up there, I guess. If you just raise your hand, I guess. Oh, we do have a mic. If you'd like to come up here and ask some questions, that's great. Oh, by the way, just want to let you know, We are, if you're interested in hearing more about the story or reading about it, we are selling the book in the room next door. So, and I will be available throughout the rest of the today and tomorrow to sign the book if you wish. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, Dan. We had Dan speak to us in MUFON Los Angeles about 4 months ago when he began his adventure, or his odyssey. I just wondered, in the past 4 months, if you haven't talked to anybody about the feel for what the actual secrecy does to the country, and hopefully, if you can't answer it this time around, maybe 6 months from now. There seems to be an erosion to especially the people who follow this on a regular basis and follow other mysteries, to the confidence that we have in our government, etc. And I'm just wondering if there's any, as being an insider, if there's any feel from the internal part of that for that kind of erosion, or is this group that holds all of this very elitist?
Yeah. I feel that there's several different governments, if you want to ascribe or put that term on it. You know, President Clinton is the leader of one government, but there are separate entities within the government that President Clinton doesn't know about. And indeed, I think probably the last president that knew about the gray aspects of our government was President Reagan. That's my belief, only from what I've gathered. So, and I think Truman probably is the one that started the whole gray tentacles of our society, or of our government. And since then, it has splintered so much that you have one gray project that doesn't even know about another gray project. And I don't think there's any one person that knows everything anymore. And that is the problem, right there.
When you've been through this training, does this stick with you, and are you able to still have communications not only with your original contacts but with the great matrix of other things?
You know, the ability is always going to be there, obviously, because it's a genetic ability. But as soon as I was relieved of duty from the black aspect as well as the gray aspect, but as soon as I wasn't working in that building anymore, all communication ceased. Not only from my gray commander, but also from my contacts, the alien contacts. So this is definitely under the guise of the project. It's not, hi, I'm here, let's talk. You know, it's not like that.
Do you think this is a technology-based compared to mental telepathy that other people seem to have the ability to?
You know, a lot of people have tried to assign the telepathic terminology to this particular thing that I did, and I don't know. I don't know if they have a correlation. I do know from my reading that telepathy is much more perhaps ambiguous. My communications were very, very, very succinct. I mean, it wasn't like I was in a trance or lucid. It was very lucid. I wasn't dreaming or anything like that. I was just sitting at my console, and I would start getting a communication. And these were, and a lot of people have said, well, how do you know you're not in a telepathic type of experiment with a human that's on the other side of the building communicating with you? Well, the nature of the communications was not human-based. You know, humans have a certain way of communicating. We go from point A to point B to point C to point D. This was not that type of communication, and that's the best way I can describe it. So I don't think it was, I don't know if it had any relation to telepathy, perhaps, and maybe not. But I do think it was technology-based in as much as my learning, because obviously the technology of the computer that I was interfacing with is not something that we are readily exposed to. A lot of people correlated it to the Monroe Institute and the different halves of the brain, and I just learned about that at this conference. That's an interesting aspect, and it could have some correlation to it.
Did they put you through any type of disinformation or erase your brain sort of thing at all to try and get you to? You mentioned that you did not take the pills. That they were. I thought you in the book that you said you had to take a pill, 2 pills every time you went through the program.
Well, at the school I was taking 2 pills, and later on, can't remember which base it was, but I started to take 1 pill, and at sometimes I wasn't taking any pill. So it just varied. And I don't know exactly what the criteria was for the variance of it, but
You didn't try to grab one of these pills to take it out with you? Or anything?
no, because, again, it never dawned on me that I would come forward with this. I was just a soldier doing my job. And if I made waves or whatever, then, who knows what would happen. So, I mean, not as far as killing me, but who knows, I might have got thrown out or whatever at the time. So,
Since you've been on your own, have you tried to develop your capabilities on your own, such as the remote viewing or any of the other aspects of it?
no, for one, I don't have any desire to do that. But the communications that I received were from them. I never initiated any communications whatsoever. It was always initiated from them, and then I would transcribe or whatever the information and send it out. It was a two-way communication. I could ask questions, obviously, because I did, but I never knew how to get a hold of them, so to speak. I didn't know their address. It just happened to me, and then when they signed off, that was it. So they controlled the communications, and I never have tried to work on that or well, I have actually tried to communicate with them, but it's to no avail.
Well, I guess my question was partially answered by the previous gentleman, but I'm not clear exactly what the electronics and the computer, what role they played, because you said that it was supposed to be a way to communicate when there is no electronics around.
Mhm.
Was the computer in your case used as a training device, and
Exactly.
eventually you could get rid of it? Or
Oh yeah, the
how-
computer
can you
was not
clarify?
necessary. The computer was not necessary once I had gone through my school. The computer was only necessary to help me to uncover the abilities, and it was an interface. It provided a feedback for what was happening with my mental growth with the ability. And once that happened, and once I broke out of that, so to speak, and I learned how to do it, I didn't need that computer anymore. That computer was just a measurement tool. That's all it was.
Okay, so there were cases where you didn't have a computer, you just sat somewhere.
Well,
on
I
your
would have a
own.
computer, but it wasn't necessary for the communication. All it was I would type what I was receiving into the computer, and it would be sent out to an organization somewhere. But yeah, if we take it one step further and say, okay, what if all electromagnetic communication stops around the nation, around the world? Well, I wouldn't have to have any computer. I could just receive the information, write it down on a piece of paper, and give it to somebody.
Thank
So-
you.
In your initial briefing, were you given any more details about the event that would cause a disruption of conventional electromagnetic
No,
communication?
I was not. And I don't think, in retrospect, I don't even think he knew. I think he was regurgitating information that he was told. So, no, I didn't.
And in that same briefing, you mentioned that your mother had been abducted and your embryo.
That's what they told me, yeah.
Did you have any sense that was part of a larger agreed upon program at any level?
Well, I think it was part of the Preserve Destiny program, but I think probably there are other programs as well that have other goals and missions. So,
Thanks.
mhm.
That's connected with my question. I do regressions for people who've been abducted, and frequently they have the experience that, or they explain that they have the ability to communicate when they're needed. They don't have any sense of what that is, and I'm wondering if this would be part of that same project. Do you know anything about any other?
Yeah, it's true. I was only communicated with when I was needed. There are so many different aspects of abduction data, and I do not pretend to know anything or a great deal about that phenomenon. I wasn't even abducted. I don't think I've never been abducted. So I don't know if I'm qualified to comment on that.
Okay, well, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I got a two-part question. First part, are there any indications that this is strictly a U.S. government project or a multinational project? And part two is, could it be part of an agenda for some type of a global brain, in other words, linking all of humanity into the contact with one or more species of aliens?
Wow. Yeah, there's so many correlations that could be, and as a matter of fact, it's been brought to my attention at this conference that there may be another goal for preserved destiny, one of, linking into the one world government, and perhaps my mother was not abducted. That was just something to give me a tangible, a tangible thing to grasp onto, reason, I guess. Perhaps I'm just part of the lineage of alien human interface. There's so many different things that could be the real truth. What was the first part of what you were saying? I want to get to that.
Whether it was strictly a U.S. government
Oh, yeah,
project or
exactly.
were there any indications that it could be multinational? In other words, involving other countries?
Yes, I did ask, on one occasion I did ask whether we were the only ones that were involved with this, and the answer was there are more than one. I didn't get any specific
In other words,
countries or anything.
You're saying more than one government?
Yes.
Besides the United States?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I firmly believe that this probably has, UK and Japan, maybe in Australia, the major countries that have control over the, if you look at it, those countries have control over the world, whether you want to admit it or not, they do.
How about England? Because England seems to have.
Yeah, I said the UK.
Oh, you said.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, probably so.
Okay.
I don't know. I only speculate. These are only speculations on my part, but I'm sure that they probably didn't choose America because we have good movies. They probably chose America because we are a very stable nation, and the information that is shared can be assured that it's going to continue on, and the stability is there. So I don't know. Unstable nations are probably not good candidates for sharing information.
Yeah, you said.
Of course, they were stable at one time, so who knows? But
you said that your gestation, I guess, was genetically managed.
Mhm.
Okay. Have you noticed anything else about yourself in your
Um,
life that
I've always been an odd duck, but nothing that I can put a finger on. No.
Okay.
No, well, I guess. Yeah, there have been weird things that have happened in my life, but I hesitate to bring them out and to discuss them because I don't know if they really have a correlation with this. And I know, but they're really insignificant probably. So it's okay. Well, I have on occasion had the ability to hear earthquakes. I don't know if that has any correlation with it, but I can hear very, 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 very high-pitched sounds previous to real large earthquakes. And this has been documented by my friends and family. As a matter of fact, I live in Portland, Oregon, and the day before Mount St. Helens blew, I put it on the calendar. I said to my grandma, I said, Mount St. Helens is going to blow this day, and it was on the calendar even. Actually, I predicted it the night of the 17th of May, and it went off the morning of the 18th of May. So, yes, maybe that has a correlation, or maybe it's just a defect in my hearing. I don't know, but
the other question I had was if there is a communications breakdown, do you think you'll be recalled, reactivated? Yeah.
I probably do not think so. Only because they probably have enough trained people to do it, if indeed that is the mission. And also, my attitude going out probably isn't conducive for, controlling me to the point where I could do that. So probably not.
Well, one last question.
Sure.
Do you know anything about how all this is funded?
Yeah.
Where the money comes from?
Oh yeah, I can tell you that. That comes from the black projects. It comes from the black budget. And that's another reason why the black aspect of the government is very, very important, because without the black project, you have no buffer zone between the gray and just normal everyday stuff. And when that's why they co-locate the two projects together. When you have some interested congressman or some curious person that has some power starting to delve into, well, why are we spending so much money here? Well, they can bring him in and say, okay, Congressman, we're going to brief you on this. It's all nice and hush-hush and secret, and the congressman feels real important, and they brief him on the black project, and they say, oh, okay, that's why you need all this money. Okay, and they sign it off, and they didn't have to go any further into the gray project. So,
Thank you.
I'd like to know if your training entailed what we would maybe call biofeedback, be similar to it.
yeah,
And that-
a lot of people have correlated to that, but I hesitate to compare the two because I didn't have anything to feed back. There was no thing on me, like a pulse or anything that would feed back to the computer what I was doing. It was, in a sense, feedback or biofeedback because I was using an exterior motivator or an exterior thing, the tone in my ear,
Okay.
to uncover the mental aspect of.
There was
of
no wire connection, no anything
Well, the only
to
thing
the computer.
that I was touching at the time was the earphones. The earphones were on my ears, but they were to listen to the tones that were given to me as well as my instructor, because I never saw my instructor. He was always somewhere else, and he would talk to me through the headphones. So now, if the headphones had little things on them that was monitoring something around my ear, I don't know. I don't even know if there is something to monitor around the ear, but.
There are some people doing this line of work, but I believe there is an electrical attachment maybe that they put on you as well as the
Yeah.
earphones
Yeah, I know.
and the tapes, and it is causing some people to have experiences like
I've heard
we were
this
talking
before.
about. Elmer Green, who was the father of biofeedback, and also helped organize the association called ISEEM. There are some in that group working with this. Patricia Norris, and they pulled out from Miniature Clinic. There was a fellow in Midland, Texas, that talked to a fibromyalgia group, and he said it would probably take about 10 sessions to know whether or not this would help you or not. But it was this same thing. It was called neurotherapy, and it could also help with certain illnesses also. I find it quite fascinating, and I do believe if you're looking for it that there is some help available
Correlation.
on this correlation.
Yeah.
Maybe not exactly the same thing, but I find it quite fascinating. Also, they're saying we're going to be able to control our computers with our mind only. It's
I don't doubt
like-
that at all.
Uh-huh.
Bill Gates can do anything. Oh, by the way, Bill Gates is an alien.
That wasn't a Microsoft advertising? Yeah, thanks really from the bottom of our hearts for doing this. And I've been involved with classified work during my career. And what really strikes me here after reading all the material about the governments and how this government is doing this and this government is doing that and everything is compartmentalized.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Within the United States and also within Russia with the old KGB and in other countries. In this country we have the Federal Reserve Bank. The problem with the forests and the Amazons is the World Bank. So I would like to see a push for us to get the whole thing organized. Now you might know some contacts, I probably know some contacts, and people out here might know some contacts, but rather than sitting back and saying, hey, these guys are doing it to us or they're not telling us anything, why don't we help the powers that be organize things and get all this figured out?
Well, in order to bring things to do what you're saying, you have to approach it from the position of power, and we are not at the ultimate position of power, and that's the problem with the whole. The whole problem. That's the problem with it, is that we don't have the power to bring these things together. The people who are in power to do that are not going to do that because they have something special, and they don't need us or to bring it together. Knowledge is power, and they have the knowledge.
I fully understand, and I will disagree on one point. When a person wants lots of money or when a person wants power, they'll do anything to get it. Once they have it, they realize they have to use it. Then they look for other people. Well, how can I best use my money so I can make money? Or how can I use my power to keep myself in power? If their job is to find out about the alien agenda or whatever and provide this kind of communication, let us help them do it. They can still be in power. We'll just help them create what they want to create anyway.
But the people, you're talking about people in power who are not really in power.
No, I'm talking about people in power that want to go in that direction and they want to stay in power and go in that direction. Great, let's help them go in that direction.
Mhm.
Let's organize things. Let's get a presidential directive that cuts across departments through the joint
That won't
chiefs.
work, unfortunately.
I'm saying it can try. We could try.
Well, we
it.
could try anything.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not. Don't say it won't work. Say it might not work.
I'm approaching it from my perspective, and my take on it is that not even the President of the United States knows about, well, I can't say that for sure, but probably does not know about everything relating to the gray aspect of things. So
Fully understand, but
yeah.
the people that are going to be watching this tape realize that we have people that want that to happen.
Yeah.
And if we say we want it to happen, and it starts at the World Bank level and trickles down, they'll tell the president to make it happen, or whatever. So I'm holding to create that. Okay, got it, guys?
Thanks for
Let's
your
create that.
comments.
Hi, I was just curious to know whether or not in any of the interaction that you had with these beings, whether or not they made any references or they were aware of other races of alien beings that were on the planet.
No. Unfortunately, I have to approach this from my memories, and memories kind of coagulate with one another and with your own perceptions, and I do get a sense that there were more than one. I can't remember the exact specific conversation, but my perception is that there were more than one species that were in contact with, well, maybe not even contact, but in existence here on Earth. So, and I have to comment on that too. I don't think that they're just kind of walking around with us, obviously. And their manipulation of time is such that they can come into our reality, I think, and then leave our reality. It's not like they have to hang around all the time. They have a corner bar that they have to hang out at when they're not doing something. But yes, in answer to your question, I do believe that there are more. But it's not based on a concrete conversation that I had. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and with also the understanding that time not being linear, certainly from their perspective, how long ago could you say, or were you able to ascertain how far back do they go in terms of our linear timeline? Would it go back to the Paleolithic time or Jurassic time? Or
they said that they have impacted. He said they have impacted 3 different societies in our history. You know, we can probably, just based on our knowledge of how certain societies in history have been a little bit more advanced than their surrounding neighbors, perhaps we can surmise which ones they were, but I didn't get that information.
okay, thank you.
If you read about history, almost always whenever a major change happens in human society, it almost always comes from the grassroots and not from the heads of power. Even though it seems like it's impossible, somehow the grassroots always wins.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always sort of thought from reading a lot of books on abduction and stuff is maybe the aliens know that, and they do work a lot with just common ordinary people all over the world.
Yeah, the grassroots comment is I think was true a long time ago, but today we have, I think our society has changed to the point where the grassroots are not as powerful as they once were. But again, you know, the people in the white hats always win. So.
Could you elaborate just a little bit on that going around time?
I wish I could. That's the exact terminology that I had transcribed from our communication was they go around time, and they use this for their travel method. I mean, I don't know exactly what the propulsion method is to do that, but that is physically how they travel, is they go around time. And I wish that I could have had them expound upon that, but it didn't happen.
The other question I have might be a little too personal, but does your mother recall anything about what they say they
It
did?
always gets back to my mom. I have not discussed this with my mother. And those of you who have heard me on Art Bell, we talked about this a little bit, and somebody called up and said, "You really should tell your mother." It was some like 60-year-old lady, you know. It was very nice of her to say that. The reason why is that the only question you have?
Yes.
Thanks. The reason why I haven't told my mother is because I don't want our relationship to be affected by this. And a lot of people say, you know, when we come from your standpoint, believers, people who believe that, you know, there is something going on and you're trying to grasp as much information as possible, coming from that standpoint, you say, well, why not tell her? You know, you can get more information. Well, I've already experienced in my family and other aspects of my family that telling them is not exactly the best thing for the relationship. Because if they believe you, great, everything's wonderful. If they don't, then your relationship is affected. So why even do it? You know, it's just not worth it. And I know that my experience is genuine. I know what has happened. And whether my mother corroborates anything or not doesn't change what has happened to me and what the experience is. And the only type of corroboration she'll probably have is, yeah, okay, I remember some lights and some whatever, you know, whatever the abduction scenario was. But that's not going to lend any credibility. I mean, there's a lot of people that say that. It's not going to lend any credibility to my experience in the military. So I just have not chose to do that. And someday she'll probably find out. You know, she doesn't travel in these circles, so to speak. She doesn't read these publications. But maybe, you know, if I'm on 60 Minutes someday, she might find out. So who knows? But I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
When you were writing in the communications...
You might want to get closer to the...
When you were writing in the communications from the source you don't know about, what did they say?
The actual communication?
What was the actual communication? What did they say?
I really don't go into it because it's just really mundane. It's military stuff. It was all just military launches, and most of it had to do with the black aspect of my job. So I really can't discuss it anyway. But that always dawned on me or made me think, well, why in the world are they giving me these types of communications? But I think it was just if we go along the lines of, you know, there's going to be an electromagnetic communication outage worldwide, then I think it was probably to keep my ability honed, you know, to keep the practice up, so to speak, so that I will have that ability later on or continue to have that ability. So it wasn't anything of major importance that you would go, wow.
Oh, so these messages were just from our military. They weren't, you alluded to a source of a communication that seemed otherworldly.
They were,
circular
definitely.
as opposed to from A to B. So this military stuff was circular and possibly fourth dimensional, but
no, it was actual stuff. Like there was a satellite launch in China, and this was the azimuth, and things of that nature that correlated with what was happening on Earth. And I don't even know, maybe they didn't correlate with an actual event, but it was information military related.
Oh, military information from other beings.
From the aliens, yes.
Of interest to our military.
Well, I don't know if they were of interest, but there were
they
things
were
that I
there.
was...
Okay,
yeah.
that's why you were doing this. Now we're getting somewhere. This is all about. I've been wondering for the past
Okay.
hour and a half.
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
so,
folks.
So you were getting information of interest to your people you were working with. That's why you were doing this.
That is, I don't know. I don't know if that's the reason why I was doing it, but that's the information that I was getting. Yeah.
Okay.
But the ultimate purpose, we don't know. I don't know. All I know is what I was told.
So okay, thank you.
My gosh, I'm sorry. Thought I was a little bit more clear. Well, there's not a lot to open up about other than the fact that I was in this project. Go ahead.
You mentioned that they said that they had impacted 3 other civilizations.
Yes.
Before
Societies, yeah.
societies besides us.
No, I don't know which ones.
Well, more my question is, did you get a sense that these were societies that have been in existence during, what we have been taught is the rise of civilization, or that they came before
I don't know.
our prehistory?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Unfortunately.
Also,
Gosh, I wish I knew the answers to all these questions.
The other question that I have is, when they told you that you had been genetically altered, your mother had been abducted and
Managed.
okay. Were all of the people who were chosen for this program people who had been managed?
Yes. Yeah. That was kind of the credit card that you had to have to get into this club. Now, I think that there were thousands of people who were managed, but they've only brought into service, so to speak, the ones that actually went into the military. So I was kind of like the luck of the draw, so to speak. If I hadn't gone in the military, I'd probably still be sitting dumb and happy and not knowing anything about it.
So you're positive that you were actually genetically managed?
Well, no, I'm not
rather than
positive.
they just told you that for the people who they brought into this program to make them feel more...
No, I'm not positive, actually. Maybe it was just the fact that maybe I was abducted as a kid and they found out that I had the ability or a heightened sense of ability, and, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know those answers. Sorry. Interesting side note, and I'll kind of close it on this. A lot of you know, or probably know, about the Basque people in in Europe. Huh? Yeah, in the Pyrenees, and they're called the Basques. They, from what I've read and kind of what I've garnered over time, is they don't have any genetic, there's something in their genes that is different than the rest of the world. And also that their language has no, roots, so to speak. It doesn't have any affiliation to Latin or any of those languages. So maybe the Basque people were part of this interbreeding that happened. Who knows? I'm just kind of throwing that out there for people to talk about. Well, thanks a lot. Well, okay, we have one more. Great.
You were part of a gray project or a black project?
Both.
Both. Now, define for me what is a black project. And what
A
is
black project is an actual project that is kept secret for national security.
All
It
right,
has nothing to do with
all
gray.
right, we're talking about radar-resistant paint on a stealth bomber.
Whatever. Whatever
Okay.
there is out there.
All right, now, what is a gray project?
A gray project is something that has to do with an alien presence or alien connection.
Gotcha. So if Congressman Dinkleberry wants to know why $10 billion is going to this stealth bomber for paint-resistant, radar-resistant paint, then what they're doing is they're grossly exaggerating the amount of money they need for the black project, then siphoning it off into the gray project.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there's no way to beat them. I mean, to
well, if there were, we probably have done it by now. But who knows? Maybe later on down the line, in the future, we will come about with a way to do it, and we'll get enough people in power, like he was saying, that will there'll be some sort of break somewhere. I probably think it's inevitable that someday, officially this information is going to come out, and maybe they're going to land on the White House lawn and have all the press, oh, okay, well, they've done that then. What are we here for? All right, thanks a lot, folks. Appreciate your time.